for everyone for coming this evening. Thank you to the candidates for taking your time. I want to make sure that's recording. Russ, would you look up and just make sure that perfect. Thank you. All right, we had a little bit of technical difficulty before you all got here, but we have that seem to have that all taken care of. Thank you, candidates, for coming this evening. I'll introduce them. They sat again amazingly in the order I had them listed in my book. I didn't put table tents up tonight, so you must have been reading my mind. I'd like to welcome Susan Wilkins, John Power, and Sari Blazner. They are running for Lake Washington School District School Board position number 5. Thank you for attending this candidate forum. It is hosted by the Education Hill Neighborhood Association. My name is Paige Norman, and I'm your moderator this evening. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement, followed by questions from the audience. I hope you all have lots of questions this evening. Candidates have been emailed a list of topics that may be covered this evening, and in case you're all very shy and there's no questions, I do have some topics and some questions that I will be asking you. I hope to spend the majority of our time this evening with questions from the audience, and please direct all of your questions to all 3 candidates. Responses will be limited to 2 minutes per candidate, so you'll have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then 2 minutes to respond. My timer is seated right down here. It has nice, great, big numbers for you.
Appreciate that.
And it will start to beep when you have 3 seconds left. Okay? And I'm sorry, I don't have a shepherd's hook to pull you off the stage. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones so that there are fewer distractions for our candidates. Tonight's forum is being recorded and will be posted on social media, including our association's website and Facebook page. Recordings are the property of EdHNA and may be shared for the purposes of information. Please mention EdHNA when sharing any recording or material that is directly from EdHNA. Candidates, again, thank you for coming this evening. I'm not sure if the weather's decided what it's going to do, but I appreciate you coming out. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and let you start with your opening statements. Again, you have 2 minutes for your opening statements, and we're going to start with Sari.
Okay.
Oh, and one more reminder, you need to speak directly into the microphone. There you go.
Like that? Okay. All right, so first off, thanks, Paige, so much for having us tonight and letting us have this opportunity. And also thank you to all of you for coming to be able to discuss public education. It's great to see all of you here. My name's Sari Blazner, and I had the honor to serve as one of your representatives on the board for the last 8 years, and currently as president of the board. In that time, I've come to understand the board's role in ensuring that Lake Washington is a well-managed, high-performing school district, and I am seeking re-election to continue building a world-class school district. As I thought about what to say this evening, rather than giving my background, which you can find that on my website at sariblazner.com, I decided to provide some insight into who I am and what motivates me. So here goes. I value and support great schools because they are the foundation of a strong democracy. I believe that schools are a key component of great communities, and I believe that to be a great school, all students must receive an excellent and equitable education. My professional experience is varied, from community organizer as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic to a disease investigator with public health to a data analyst for HopeLink here in Redmond. In all my roles, I use my analytical skills, experiences, and relationships to positively impact the world around me. My campaign logo, a Mondrian-inspired design, reflects my passion for the arts and my desire to be forward-thinking, recognizing that education today is different and requires innovative ways to respond to challenges and to ensure students are future ready. So finally, I'd like to say I believe in aspirational goals. Without them, we cannot reach our potential. I believe that solutions to complex problems are possible with the right information, people, and mindset. I believe that collaboration and engagement by all, students, families, community, businesses, are vital to great public schools. We do this together. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Paige, for doing this for us. I have been involved in the community ever since I was really in middle school and high school. And I remember in middle school, I used to volunteer at the elementary schools, working with teachers to help kids with their various assignments. And in high school, I volunteered as camp counselors, as a camp counselor at Camp Arkyla. I graduated from Cedar Woolley High School up in Cedar Woolley, and eventually I really didn't know what I wanted to do in school, and I was 23 when I really finally decided that I wanted to be a chiropractor, and that is my passion for education in general. Is not every child is meant to be put in the same box. Every child's going to learn differently. Some kids aren't going to learn to read until maybe they are 5 or 6 years old. And when it comes to education, my whole passion is let kids learn in their own style and in their own timing. That's my big passion when it comes to education. The other thing that I'm really passionate about in regards to education is when it comes to graduation. Not every child is really meant to go to a 4-year college. Maybe a child wants to go to a 2-year tech school. Maybe a child has knowledge that they can become an entrepreneur and not have to do the extra education. There are so many options for every single child. My big thing when it comes to education is the mental health of kids going through schools. When it comes to education, we can have whatever curriculum we want in regards to education, but if their mental health isn't right, it doesn't matter what curriculum we have, they're not going to be able to learn at the best ability. So that's why I'm running for a Lake Washington School Board. Thank you.
I would like to thank Paige Norman for organizing this candidate forum, and I'd also like to thank the members of the audience for coming on this beautiful sunny evening. My name is Susan Wilkins, and I've lived on Education Hill since 1997. I have 4 children who attended Lake Washington schools beginning in 1999. Our home school was Horace Mann, but I also had kids at Einstein for Quest, Rockwell on Variance, and of course, children at Horace Mann. During 2 full years, I had children at all 3 schools, and I was very dependent on the bus system, which I discovered wasn't terribly efficient and didn't help us. So I'm an expert on transportation at this point. One of my children had a serious math learning disability and failed the WASL in 4th and 5th grades, and I was required to take him out of school and homeschool him for 2 years. So I also became an expert on how much the district wasn't especially good at special education and special needs. 2 of my goals are going to be to improve the math curriculum, which I learned to teach. And the second is to improve the way that the district recognizes and teaches students with special needs. When my kids were in high school, they didn't want to get out of bed, so I discovered that it's really common for them to have circadian rhythm problems. My third goal will be to change the start times for high school to 9 a.m. and elementary schools to 8 and 8:30. I'm almost out of time, so I'm gonna leave it there. I'm going to work hard to accomplish these goals if I'm elected, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
All right, all 3 candidates, take a deep breath. And I think we're all a little nervous. This is my least favorite place to be, and I know that it's nerve-wracking to be up there with everybody's eyes on you, but you're doing a great job. All right, do we have any questions from the audience?
What are your thought processes on the capital projects levy?
All right, so we will start with John.
So when it comes to levies in general, the first thing that most people are thinking of, especially people who are involved with the school district, are taxes. Yeah, because when it comes to passing any kind of levy, there's either going to be a tax increase, or in regards to this last levy that was passed, there was no tax increase. Everything stayed the same. I think the most important thing about capital levies is that the money is spent responsibly and is going to the right things, and is going to things that are going to improve the education and the process of education for all of our kids or our students. And I know that when it comes to levies, there's a lot of community input that comes into levies, and I think it's really important that when it comes to whether it's levies or it's bonds, that we get a lot of community input to have some extra insight into how we go about funding these levies, so that, and listening to the community input. I was at the mayoral election or the mayoral town hall a few weeks ago, and one thing that they commented on was, a few of the candidates commented on, was listening to the community and listening to the residents. Because at the end of the day, all of us up here, whoever ends up in this position, Siri's been in this position for the last 8 years now. She is working for all of you and everyone in the Lake Washington School District. We are in service to the community. So when it comes to the community, we should listen to the community and listen and take some advice on, because there are a lot of smart people within Lake Washington School District who give some advice in how we spend the money. And because we are spending taxpayers' money when it comes to levies. But at the end of the day, I believe the way the tax structure is set up, we really have to pass these levies in order to give our kids the best education at the same time. Thank you.
Susan?
Okay, it's a broad question. What do I think of the recent capital projects levy? I think that the community was not allowed to give enough input into the process. One thing that will be built is a huge addition on Lake Washington High School. Well, Juanita High School is being rebuilt, and it'll have significantly more capacity. Now we're going to add capacity to Lake Washington High School. Redmond High School is a school that's very overcrowded. So what's going to happen is our Redmond students are going to be bused or have to figure out how to get themselves over to Lake Washington High School. That was an issue that there was no discussion on it. We're also putting additions on elementary schools when we really need another new standalone elementary school. I feel that the process was rushed through as kind of a Band-Aid because the bond failed, and now we're looking at more construction later on and additional schools probably where we don't need them. I would like to see better facilities planning and population distribution analysis before we go and propose any additional construction funds, whether they're bonds or levies.
Siri?
So the capital projects levy. So as was mentioned, hasn't been mentioned yet. We think back a little bit. There was a long-term facilities task force that took place. And the role of that long-term facilities task force was to put forward a plan for our school district to look at how we will deal with our capital projects that need to address our aging buildings and our growing population. If we are to look just at our enrollment, we've grown over 6,000 students in 10 years. That's an average of 10 new elementary schools to house 600 students in each one of those. So in that process, we've been putting forward the long-term facilities committee, put together a plan. So we were going to do a bond in 2016, which passed with 65%. And that's where you see the construction for Juanita High School going on. Kirk and Meade have been remodeled and rebuilt. They'll be opening this fall. Timberline's the new middle school that will be opening on Redmond Ridge this fall. We had the luck on Education Hill that we've opened Clara Barton over here on 172nd, as well as we've opened up Ella Baker over on Redmond Ridge. So we've opened up a total of 2,000 seats, and we expect 3,000 out of this. When the plan of the Long-Term Facilities Task Force was to then go forward with the next phase. For phase 2 was 2018, and that was the bond. Unfortunately, that bond only garnered 56% of the vote. It needs a supermajority of 60% in which to pass. So with that, the board sat and worked with the superintendent and looked at what are our possibilities going forward and how we deal with our critical capacity needs. The Capitals Project Levy was that option in which to do so. It allowed us to be able to do quicker addition components. Up the center of Kirkland is one piece where we see increased growth, as well as the addition at Lake Washington High School. That was part of our master plan, that when the reconfiguration was going to take place, there was always belief we would need to do that addition, and so we needed to. Redmond High has it, and Eastlake has it. It was time for Lake Washington to have it. I'd be happy to go into much more on the capital projects levy. It's very in-depth, lots of good things.
Any other questions from the audience?
I understand that there's a busing shortage or issue. How do you plan to resolve that?
Susan, we'll start with you.
If we look at the total number of buses in the district, the school district has 136 buses. 86 are the full-length buses, 50 are the smaller buses. We have about 95 bus drivers. There is not necessarily a shortage of buses. There's a planning problem in this district. When we look at this is very unfortunate. When we look at the Director of Transportation, Jeff Miles, if you look at his LinkedIn page, you'll discover that he is running a bus company in Idaho. And so I have to ask, is he really dedicating adequate time to his job here in Lake Washington? Many, many times I've tried to email him to get improved bus transportation, only to get a response 5 or 6 weeks later. This is an issue that the board really needs to bring up with the superintendent, because the school board actually is insulated from employees. The board directs this superintendent, who's the CEO, and the superintendent interfaces with the employees. If I were elected, I would make a requirement that all of the buses have to run extremely efficiently, and we would start looking at when are the buses scheduled, how full are the buses, what are the bus routes, how much time is being dedicated by the Director of Transportation. And when we have those goals, if they can't be met, then it's time to look at alternate options.
Siri?
Transportation in a district that's 76 square miles serving 30,000 students is a challenging piece. We also have special needs students that have special requirements in how they get transported. We do McKinney-Vento transportation as well for any students experiencing homelessness, as well as working with preschool transportation. So it's a very complex challenge. So as we look at all those things, there is the challenge of those bus routes. We're also a 3-tiered system. So not only in order to save money, so you have budget parameters you're working with, along as geographic challenges, along with the number of students. So with that, we have an elementary school run, middle school run, and high school runs. So we try to use our buses as efficiently as possible across those pieces. Now you add the piece in our context that we've added Uber and Lyft and these other driving services. That's pulling drivers out of the system. So there's a piece of challenge of getting drivers in order to do the buses. So we've increased salary in order to be able to attract that as much. We pay for the CDL training so that they can do so. So we've done all of that. The piece as I look at this is we are working very hard from a transportation piece, but we haven't added one component yet that I do believe is highly valuable. And that's looking at our high school students being served by Metro more effectively. And so working in partnership with Metro, King County Council, possibly other providers in our area. We have Microsoft who does transportation, as well as Google, as well as Facebook, to really address this issue, and potentially school start times at the same time. You might be able to look at how we provide our transportation more effectively in partnership and leveraging outside resources. Currently, Lake Washington High School is our only school here in Lake Washington who is served by Metro. We actually purchase some of those routes, so students down in the Audubon area have a bus route. That also means our local commuters are able to do so. So I think there's some very creative ways we need to look at how we address this problem effectively.
John?
I agree with Siri in regards to looking into other creative ways to find transportation for all our kids to schools. The biggest thing, because the biggest thing that is happening within Lake Washington School District in regards to transportation, we just don't have enough drivers to drive the buses. And maybe that has to do with benefits. Maybe that has to do with it may not be a full-time job for some of these bus drivers. One thing I know is there are a lot of schools, like I'm up on Redmond Ridge. My son goes to the new school, Ella Baker, up on Redmond Ridge. And we are technically a walking school, but my son is lucky and he gets to drive a bus because we are 1.3 miles away from the school. So we actually get a bus. And we are like the one bus that actually goes to Ella Baker. And some of the things I've heard from, because I do a lot of listening and community engagement when it comes to listening to a lot of people in regards to what's going on everywhere around our schools. And buses are one of those things where I've heard there's things that go on buses in regards to bullying, just like in schools there's stuff that goes on in regards to bullying that is a problem for some parents because they eventually don't allow their kids to ride the bus because their kids are getting bullied on the bus. So I think there must be a way to allow the bus drivers to communicate more efficiently with the school principals if there are incidents on the bus in regards to behavior when it comes to kids that are riding on those buses. Because I think that is a really big thing today, not only obviously on the school buses, but in schools as well as in regards to bullying. But really at the end of the day, it's we just need more drivers. But the good thing is a lot of new schools they are building are walking schools, so a lot of kids should take advantage of walking to schools if it really is a walking school. Thank you.
With such a large district, how do you expect to be engaged and involved across all these different communities?
So we'll start with Siri.
I thought I was first. It is a large community, and it does take a lot of effort to do so. As part of the role of a board member, it is to lead, serve, and represent. And the key thing is to be connected with your community across the board. So there's multiple ways in which I'm able to do so. One, we do have a fabulous district PTSA, and that gives you an opportunity once a month to go down and be at those meetings and speak with PTSA presidents from around the district and get an idea of what's happening that way. So being able to connect into these groups. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation is another opportunity in which to be able to do so through their advisory board and through other ways in linking. I'm also involved on local projects such as Eastside Pathways. It's a collective impact model from cradle to career. It's actually in partnership with Bellevue School District as well as our cities. And so that allows you to know some of that as well. The other role from the board, and this is a piece in our work plan for this year that I have actually been spearheading to go forward in partnership with our other board members, is to develop stronger community connections through focus groups out with the parents in their own communities or through other key groups and being able to work with them. We have a district equity team at this point that we have put together that are community members. That gives an opportunity to learn more about some of the equity issues out in our community. So those are all the very different ways. And so the other piece that we're looking at doing is how do you get to student voice? Because that is probably a piece that we haven't actively done as well as we should have. And so in conversation with students around in the community, there actually will be a student working this year, this summer, on developing some of those student engagement options. And we're looking at a thought exchange and trying to utilize some technology and how to be able to bring those voices together from possibly a virtual setting as well, that it's not always going to someplace or they're coming to us, that we're able to do this in an interchange. So I think those are the different ways in which to do so.
John?
So my passion, like I said during my intro, is community engagement. I'm all about working with the community. I live up on Redmond Ridge. I'm on the board for Redmond Ridge East HOA, and I'm very involved in that community. It's not always as pleasant as many might think when it comes to what we get to hear sometimes, because not everyone is always happy with decisions you make. However, there's a lot of other ways, like Siri was talking about the PTSAs. I think one thing that makes our district really the #1 district in the entire state is our PTSAs and all the volunteers that work in our schools. And it's really working with those volunteers. It's going and meeting them. I am the kind of person that I want to go and meet people at a lot of different schools. I'm very open to meeting with PTSAs and working with principals and working with schools, meeting the students. I really want to be a face for Lake Washington School District. I want to be someone that people can say, hey, that's John Towers. He's on the school board. I have a question. I'm all about community. I think it's important for whoever is in leadership that people can come to you and ask you questions. Whether you're walking down the street, whether you're in the grocery store, they feel comfortable to come up to you and ask you a question. And that's the kind of person I am in regards to being part of the community. Lake Washington Schools Foundation, like Siri was mentioning, is an awesome foundation. I went to one of their luncheons here a few months ago, and it had a lot to do with mental health. They do some awesome things in regards to Lake Washington School District. They work a lot with mental health for our students. They work with pantry packs, which brings kids who are hungry, it brings them food. And that's another great organization to help keep engaged in a larger part of the community. I do a lot within the community as well. I'm on a board member for Lake Washington Soccer Association. I do a lot of coaching. I work with my son's Cub Scout group. There's a lot of other things that I do, and it's really just continuing to do those types of things is my plan. Thank you.
Susan?
The question of how to engage with the community is, from my point of view, one of the best ways is to read Facebook posts, watch Twitter. The old electronic feed of things will give me an idea of what's going on. I'm more introverted, and so going out and meeting the community is not as easy for me. By reading what people are writing, listening to the passion in their voice or the anger, I can collect data and take it to the board and the superintendent for feedback and for action. It may sound very insulated, but that would be how I would interface with the community. I would also contact people if I felt that I needed additional information, but the most important part is to collect the information and bring it to the board for discussion and take it to the superintendent for action if necessary.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ali Shego. And we know that the parents who have a high cable kids kind of like to drain the system and having their kids separate school. So my question is, do you believe the kids, high cable kids, be segregated in one school, or they should be part of their own home school?
John, this is yours to start.
In regards to highly capable, my wife I always have to have her remind me of that term, highly capable, because this might be the most blunt thing I say, and people are either going to like it or they're going to hate it. The term highly capable drives me nuts, because I think all kids should be treated the same. There are obviously kids who are smarter than others. There are kids who are not as smarter than others. And at the end of the day, what is our education system really about? It's about educating our kids. So when it comes to secluding or putting a kid at a higher point than another kid, in a lot of areas, people would be against that. But for some interesting reason, when there's people that think that, hey, my kid's highly capable, and the first thing that comes to my mind as a parent is like, does that mean my kid is not highly capable? If your kid is highly capable? Like, that's the blunt stuff that goes on in my head. So at the end of the day, I think, I go back to, I know it's a new day and age when it comes to education, but I go back to, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I graduated high school in 1998, and we all just went to the same school. I grew up in a very small school in Cedar Woolley, And we were all in the same school. There were no highly capable kids. There were no kids that were less capable. Everyone was treated equally. Everyone was treated with the same effort. The kids who needed extra help, they got extra help. Those who were extra smart, they, in my opinion, they actually brought up a lot of the other kids. And the truth is, at the end of the day, those kids that are highly capable, in my opinion, they're going to do very well in life. And do we need to put them in different schools and different classrooms just because they're highly capable? In my opinion, we really don't. And that's my blunt truth when it comes to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
I have 4 children, and 2 of them were in the Quest program when they were in elementary school. So they were taken to a separate school, Einstein Elementary, and put in a special class. And that's what you're asking about. Was that okay? It would be better if it's the same school and services were provided. I'm very much in favor of that. One thing that I did do was I fought the Tesla STEM school specifically because it's in rural King County, and nobody can get there if they don't have parents to take them there. One of the reasons they have free busing was because of the appeal I filed, but even that is not enough because students end up being segregated out there away from their peer group, and it totally excludes low-income minority students. So no, I don't believe that we should be separating students into the highly capable programs in their own buildings. I'm very much against that.
Siri?
So highly capable students are part of basic education. We actually receive specific funding in order to serve students who are highly capable. In the process of doing so, and so I should be, truth be told, I was in the gifted program when I was in elementary school in the Renton School District. I had the pleasure and opportunity in my home school, which is you're speaking, to have received a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade teacher who was incredible in the way that she taught. And it gave me opportunities and many other kids in that place those same opportunities. My son has also been in the Pull-Out Quest program here in Lake Washington School District, and I'm a fond believer of that as well. In regards to location of where those services are provided, because I think that's what you're asking for, I think we value neighborhood schools very much, and that is a strong value within our community, and we work hard to ensure families are able to stay within their neighborhood schools. When we had the growth issues going on, the Quest and Highly Capable program here oftentimes would get moved from school to school in order to make space for a neighborhood school because it was a program that pulled from many places. So when we did the reboundary in Redmond with the opening of Clara Barton and the opening of Ella Baker, one of the criteria and parameters we put forward was, can you put highly capable kids back in their neighborhood schools and provide services there? And so in that process of the rebounding, that's exactly what we were able to do. And there's only 2 schools currently now in the Redmond Learning Community, and that'd be Mann and Rockwell, who have no space at this moment for highly capable. So we have succeeded at being able to get out to the neighborhood school. They do still have a special class. They are in that sense, but they're in the neighborhood school. We also then provide a push-in program in our K1, actually now K through 5, in order to support students, because students have the right to be challenged at the level that they're at, and this is the role of the highly capable program in which to do so.
Thank you.
What I haven't seen in your bios is, why are you running for the school board seat? From what I've heard of other school board members, something grabbed them. Something was wrong. Something that they didn't agree with. What are we not doing that we need to be doing? What are we doing wrong? Was there a vote in the past year that you disagreed with? Why are you running for school board?
I think we start with Susan this time.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Susan. Thank you.
So the event or item that has driven me to run for school board probably was the start times that they said that they were going to be changing, and then I assumed it was for high school students, that they would be starting later, and discovered that no, it was the elementary students who would be moving to start times at 9 and 9:30 a.m. And I felt like, and the purpose of that was to add additional periods to the high school, from 6 periods to 7 periods. And so I felt, you don't put the burden on elementary students so that the high school students can have additional time in school. And the whole purpose of that was for busing. That was really the event that made me think I should work on this. And it's one of my 3 goals, is to get the start times for high school students later and elementary students earlier. So that's mine.
Siri?
So when I first ran for the school board, which was back in 2011, there was a time when my daughter has dyslexia. And so in that process, I had been advocating very heavily within the school district, trying to be able to get her services that she needed to go forward. In that time, I began to learn a lot about the challenges within the special education system, and we actually chose to deny getting an IEP and just accept a 504, because that would provide her what we needed, and that we would provide the additional services. My concern as a parent at that point was, what other students behind me, knowing that dyslexia is a very common learning disability for students who have difficulties reading and other components, that I wanted to try to change the policy from the other side so no other parent had to go through and do that. I will say what I've learned is I've been on the board for these 8 years, and the other component, so there was actually one other piece which drove me to do so, community engagement. When I was working with the school district, there were pieces that I didn't feel that they were going out to the community enough, similar to what you hear here, and that we needed to have more engagement to be able to bring that input in and have committees in which for parents to be involved in our community to be engaged. So those were my reasons in which I initially ran. At this point, I think we've been able to make some good progress in those areas. We have several different task forces at hand that helps to support that community engagement. We're working to reach out much more than we have before. At the same time, dyslexia has now we've started to do universal screening for dyslexia for the first time. There's some excellent work on reading difficulties going on. That has the possibility of really making that shift in that K2 and reading by 3rd grade. It's exciting opportunities. And what I see now is we have a lot of really solid work that's been done. We've just updated our strategic plan. There's going to be some revision and vetting and communications with the community to get feedback on that. And we're at the set to really go forward and really do some amazing work in multiple different ways. So I'm just excited to go forward with it.
John?
So first and foremost, someone told me to. I was part of so in our community, I do a neighborhood watch. I do a neighborhood watch program, or not a neighborhood watch, but I do a block party. The last 2 or 3 years, I've organized a block party, and I had numerous people within the block party tell me you should run for something because you're so involved, you're engaged in the community. So community engagement is a big one. And I also have 3 young boys. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 7-year-old, like I mentioned earlier, that is at Ella Baker. And so I want to be involved. I want to be involved in decision making. I really enjoy board positions because we get to make decisions. We get to make logical decisions. And anyone that's on a board, and Siri would probably attest to this, that you have to have a level head to be on any board. You have to be able to have discussion with all the board members and come to a logical conclusion at the end of whatever it is that you're talking about. Mental health for me is probably the number one thing on why I'm running for school board. Mental health for me is really, really important. Because at the end of the day, our kids who are going through our school system, whether they have been tested as having a mental health issue or not, every child has something going on, whether it's a stress, whether they're depressed, something. And it's really the job of whether it's the teachers, whether it's the school counselors, whether it is the principals or whoever, paraeducators, to figure out which kids need extra help in regards to having the best education that they can have. When I was younger, I was a very, very shy student. Believe it or not, I did not like talking in front of groups. Now people can't get me to shut up. which I'm not sure what happened between when I was in second grade and now. I must have had a teacher that really inspired me at a very young age to be able to speak up in front of groups. But that's the kind of stuff that is really needed in our education system, is whether it's a teacher, like I said, a teacher, a paraeducator, a counselor, which I think we need more counselors in schools. We need more paraeducators in schools, because that is really, really important for us, our kids, to be successful in regards to their education.
Can you please talk about how you think the district should address the increasing diversity in the East Side community? Suri.
Thank you for that question. In the past years, as we've all noticed, there's been a lot of growth, and our demographics have shifted dramatically. We see an increase in our English language learning population and all of that. With that comes great benefits, that we have this diversity and cosmopolitan, different viewpoints, and the opportunity to learn from everybody and across the board. On the other piece, that also brings challenges. We now have over 100 languages spoken within our schools, and so being able to provide excellent English learning language services to ensure that these students are able to get English as quick as possible and maintain their academic supports along the way, that's a big component. The other piece is working with our staff to ensure a culturally responsive teaching and being aware of the different opinions, different viewpoints, different cultural attitudes that come into our classrooms. That is important to be able to best respond to the needs of those students and ensure that they are integrated and brought forward. As been mentioned tonight in regards to school climate, that's the piece with this diversity that's come in, working with the equity and ensuring that we are able to incorporate and build a strong, welcoming, inclusive community for all those students is vital. And that involves both our staff and training very well on practices on how to do so. That involves working with our bus drivers so that they also know. It involves working with paraeducators. And so it's creating an environment where everybody comes in and feels inclusive. So I think those are all components. Our PTSA is probably another real big piece that is involved with that, and being able to support a community environment to bring families in, because not only is it the children in our classroom, but we have families who come from extensive backgrounds that are very different. We have some families who are choosing to come, and we have other families who have been coming as refugees, a very different concept.
John?
So I mentioned earlier that I'm on the board at Redmond Ridge East HOA, and this is the one thing that we've been dealing with within our own community up on Redmond Ridge. There was this new apartment complex built with 108 units, and it probably made Redmond Ridge more diverse than it has ever been since they started doing building up there. And within the community, with the adults, there has been backlash and people getting upset and annoyed at the actions of some of these people from this apartment complex. And I bring it up this way because at the end of the day, we need to be very inclusive. We need to allow people to feel included and part of a community, because everyone who is within Lake Washington School District, no matter what your income is, no matter what your language is, no matter what your ethnic group is, you are all welcome here. And we as a district must be open to and available to showing all of these groups that they are welcome within our district, and they can get the same education that every other child gets. Because at the end of the day, what does every parent want for their kids? It doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter their sex, doesn't matter their income, doesn't matter language. They want their kid to have the best education possible so that they can go on in the future to do bigger and better things and be successful. That's what every parent wants for their kids. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter how much money they make. They want their kids to be the best they possibly can. So the great thing is, I feel that Lake Washington School District is already on the path to performing that and allowing people of all different races, all different, whatever it is, to feel like they get a great education. And it's about educating a lot of times the parents as well, because a lot of times when it comes to the kids, talking to other kids, it comes to how parents are educating their own kids.
Susan?
I very much agree with just about everything that Siri said, and so I'm not going to add anything else. If we could move on.
Okay, sounds good. Any other audience questions?
Also, in a very large district, how do you make sure that you meet the needs of all the different students that are in your district?
I think we start with John this time.
When it comes to meeting the needs of every single student, it's what we were talking about earlier in regards to, we have a lot of programs within our district. We have the highly capable, we have the special education, which I think they really are both important. Because if you think of the highly capable, I think of Montessori style. My wife is a middle school science teacher, so her and I have a lot of discussions. She's not in Lake Washington, she's in North Shore, so she's kind of, I guess, a competitor. I don't know. You guys decide. But we have a lot of discussions in regards to this type of thing as far as making sure we give all kids the equal opportunity within the district. So, and the discussion that what I always end up bringing up is we talk about highly capable, we talk about special ed. But what about everyone in between? Those are the ones that really need to have support as well. Because a lot of times those are I think sometimes they might feel the district isn't on purpose saying, hey, we're going to forget all of you in the middle. But I feel that some of the times the ones that are in the middle tend to get forgotten if they're not highly capable and if they're not special needs. But at the end of the day, we do need to address special needs. So if there's someone that needs extra help, we should obviously give them extra help. I'm a very realist, and all of my thoughts, I'm very much a realist in how I think. So obviously, if someone needs help, give them help. If someone is doing awesome in their education, we should probably make it a little bit more difficult for them and give them some extra things to do, and maybe even going up to the next grade. So if you're in third grade and you're doing fourth grade work, maybe you should be doing fourth grade work, and that's that Montessori type of style. But at the end of the day, that's I'm not sure how much a district can really change that right away. It's going to take state levels and federal levels to do those types of things.
Susan?
So you're asking, how do we ensure that every student receives a good education? And when we look at the test scores at 4th, 7th, and 11th grade, we do see that 20% are not able to pass the tests. And a lot of those students are classified as having special education needs. We are not doing enough for them. We don't have a program for parents to figure out how do they make their children, bring their children to the teacher's attention. I experienced that. Now, Siri referred to an improvement in the system. I'm not aware of it. Okay. What I would focus on is creating a system that empowers parents to refer their children when they believe something is going wrong, whether it's a reading or a math issue or a behavioral issue, as well as teachers being able to refer students. I believe we need more counselors, we need more behavior therapists to help students learn to control their impulses. Basically, I think that special education needs a lot of work, and I would work to figure out how to make it happen quickly.
Siri?
Okay. In order to meet the needs of all students in a system, that is a broad question. The mission of Lake Washington School student is every student future ready. That in and of itself implies all students. So as we do that, part of the work that we do at the board level is we look at all the data that comes through. So when you speak of test scores and those components, We're looking at that data, also disaggregated. So we break it out and we look at it by race and ethnicity. We look at it by gender. We look at it by special education. We look at it by 504. We look at it by a variety of subgroups, looking to see are there areas where we would expect that our students are not doing as well as we might hope, and do we need to target activities and efforts in those areas? Through that work, and that's part of the policy governance work we do on the board, is really that results oriented. A lot of the conversation has come out of, it was clear our low-income students were not being served as effectively as we would want. Neither were our African-American students, our Latino students. Special education students were not performing at the level we would hope would be possible. So we've done a lot of work in being able to address that. So there have been very targeted, effective programs that we've done so in being able to do these things. We have interventionists who work specifically with Safety Net. Some of the work with dyslexia going forward, hopefully we'll start to address those issues, as well as when we look at our graduation rates, which is sort of our ultimate goal in the long run for our school district. We now we have a 93.6% graduation rate, which is the highest Lake Washington has ever had. As we broke those out across all our groups, we've seen that each one of those groups has made significant progress and improvement, and that's because of targeted, specific interventions addressed to those needs. At the same time, that's the target. We do a lot of prevention work across the board and being able to set a school climate that all students can succeed within that setting, so that's the other component that you have to do.
Schools fit into a larger community. It's not just about kids and education. How can the school district serve as a community resource, not just as a place for kids to go to class?
I believe it's Susan's.
Oh, because I am.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yes. Could you repeat that? Oh,
Good thing there's only three of us.
How can schools act as a community resource? When school begins and school ends, there are children in the before school program and after school program who are there while their parents are at work. So we have very large I believe it's YMCA that acts as a daycare center. So from that point of view, they are already acting as community resources. We have lots of sports that take place. We have meetings that occur in the gyms. But it's surprisingly, use of our school facilities before and after school are difficult to even reserve because they are well subscribed to. Is that what you're asking?
Siri?
Our schools are community resources, absolutely, and they should be used 24/7 if at all possible in which to do so in that partnership. So some of the work that we've done over the last years is we do have memorandums of understanding, so basically agreements with our cities on utilization of space. So our gyms, our common spaces, our fields, all of those are in partnership with our cities to ensure that those facilities are being able to be utilized at all times. I don't know if anybody walks by Redmond High at any point, you will always see a soccer team out there, or possibly lacrosse, or football, or anything, but somebody's out playing on those fields. Our performing arts centers consistently across the district are utilized at all times and in high demand. So to build those partnerships means working with our cities very closely in which to do so, as well as to nonprofits in order to bring those services in. We also have very clear policies. Did you really give me 2 minutes? I don't think you did.
Go ahead. Continue.
Sorry. No, that's all right. Because the piece I want, no, I just lost my train of thought with that too. No, don't fire him. So with the whole community piece, so we've done a lot of work at really building those community pieces. Our policies actually at the board level, we have a policy specifically around this on our facilities that states, ensure that our communities have access to these facilities as long as it does not hinder curricular and student capacities. That's it. So our goal is really to build those and to make this happen. So I sit on the community stakeholders group for the city of Redmond. That helps to do some of those things to be able to learn those facilities. There are so many opportunities of what we could be doing with our schools. The possibility of partnering and being able to bring those together so that we have city facilities and needs with our parks and recs and different things and preschools, along with the school being offered. Old Redmond Schoolhouse is a perfect example of what we were looking at doing, with having a preschool in there, along with having the gym being used by the Historical Society being there. This is where our schools should be, because they are a key thing. At Rockwell, when we were there, we needed a kindergarten playground. And I remember applying for a Starbucks grant, but it had to be a community playground. And they were like, well, this is at the school. Who uses it? I said, our schools are parks in our community. That's what they are. They're part of our green space. So that's how we need to view them and to build those partnerships even more going forward so that they're even stronger.
John.
You got 2 minutes?
Yeah, you did. I'm sorry.
Go ahead and start as soon as he starts talking.
We're good. When it comes to the district involving more of the community, when it comes to the Lake Washington School District specifically, I've been involved in the people using those resources. I remember back in 1997, 1998. I started officiating soccer in 1994. I was 14, so just do the math on how old I am now. So I remember in 1998 or 1999, I was in Redmond High School's high school field, and we were reffing like a state cup game. But in my head, I was from Cedar Woolley, small town, hick town, right? And I just assumed I was in Seattle. So according to me, I was in Seattle, even at Redmond High School. And then eventually I moved here 10 years ago. And now I know Redmond is not Seattle. Youth fields for their soccer practices. I also coach Lake Washington Youth Soccer. I coach my son's first grade team. The other interesting thing is a lot of these sports groups, like Lake Washington Youth Soccer, Redmond North Little League, they use grade levels for based on where they put these kids on their teams. And a lot of these kids are going to the same school together. So all these parents get to meet. They get to meet each other outside of the school while their kids are playing sports. So I'm obviously a huge advocate for sports because I think sports teaches a lot of things, life lessons in itself, and also the way that our sports system is set up on the east side is very, very linked to the school district. In Richmond, I taught an enrichment class at Ella Baker. I taught a soccer class, an after-school class this past year. So I got to actually engage and work with kids within the schools as an outside business. And that's it. That's my 2 minutes.
The timer gets to ask a question. I have a son who's 20 years old. He thought he wanted to go to college. He went over, spent some time at Central, did not do well, and figured out at the end of a quarter that he was done. But what he did discover at that point in time was that technical education was for him. So what is the responsibility of the school board to impart upon the district and the superintendent as far as some of these programs that we've kind of let get away? For myself, it would have been drafting, electronics, metal shop, automobile shop, stuff like that. Is there just no money to do those things anymore? Or is it something that can be addressed in the reasonably near future to take care of these kids who maybe fall out of that space that says, oh, I'm going to go to a four-year school and maybe go to some sort of technical school? I would like to see your feedback on that. Thank you.
I believe it's Sari. Were you just first? John, we ended with John. We'll reset the clock and we'll start with Sari and
no, that's all right. So absolutely. Four-year college is not the choice of all students as they graduate. All students should be prepared for whatever option they choose, be it military, a 2-year college, working, a vocational approach, whatever option they want. Our goal is to guarantee that they are ready to do whichever pathway they want to go and have the means in which to do so. So specifically on career and technical education, we do have a department specifically in that, and there is efforts and work going on to expand that. So there is WANIC, and DigiPen. So we do offer some courses. We do partner with our community colleges as well. So Lake Washington Tech is another one. So there are some opportunities out there, but we haven't expanded them to the level that we should. And that's the next step to really start thinking about how do we ensure that hands-on opportunities, not only at the high school level, but start that exploration in the middle school level so that those students have the opportunity for some of that hands-on career-connected learning that's going forward and being able to see how what they're learning applies and is relevant in the real world. So we have some exciting things that are happening. Evergreen Middle School is a place where we're currently partnering with Microsoft to look at possibilities around a much more broader area of career pathways for explorations for students at that way. And that's just sort of a pilot of where a concept will be. That'll take about a year in which to develop. At the same time, I've been able to attend some national school board meetings and hear from around the nation. There's some great things with career and technical education and partnering with your businesses or with your cities, and that you actually set up maybe half-day programs that students are going to that location. For instance, automotive. You're going to an automotive dealer. They have all the technology and the equipment and the up-to-date. There you do some core courses along in partnership with a community college, as well as have the hands-on learning specific to fixing cars and using that new technology and the whole direct thing. So there's examples of that in the healthcare industry as well in the automotive. So we have a lot of possibilities, and that actually is all set to be starting, especially with dual credit. It's a lot of work at the state level that's being supported down to the local level. So it's pretty exciting.
John?
I believe that community colleges are huge. There's the Running Star program that's been around forever. I remember they had it when I was in school. I would have loved to do it, but I had soccer at the same time, so I couldn't do it while I was playing soccer. So obviously I made a decision back then. But community college is huge because there's so many options in the community college level. And I absolutely believe that every kid has a different path at the end of high school. I swore I was going to be a teacher when I first got into high school. And then I was a police officer. And then eventually, after I graduated high school, I went in the Army. I actually joined the Army before I even got out of high school. And so I got into the Army. I got a medical discharge because of my feet. I got out. I ended up doing odd jobs for the next year. I didn't actually go to college until I was 19. I went to a community college first, figured out I want to be a police officer or a teacher, eventually went into Western to try to become a teacher. And the pathway just wasn't what I wanted. I ended up doing job shadowing at a high school with high school students in a PE class. And in my head, I'm like, I don't want to do this. And so I ended up talking to my chiropractor, and that's how I became a chiropractor. 2 weeks after talking to my chiropractor, I drove to Davenport, Iowa when I was 22 years old, and I went to chiropractic college. I ended up taking prerequisite classes and then got into chiropractic school. People think I was crazy for doing that. But at the end of the day, when kids are going through high school, it's such a crazy age, like from about 20 to 30, right? 10 years there. There's so much stuff going on in everyone's heads naturally of what they really want to do. So is it really natural for every single kid must go get a 4-year degree, no matter what, have all the college debt, have to pay back that college debt like never because the college debt is so much, because it costs so much to go to a 4-year school today unless you get a scholarship. And so I love the idea of trade schools. I love the idea of hopefully allowing more of these types of things coming into our high school system, even middle school system, to allow kids to have these opportunities to go that direction. Thank you.
Susan?
Historically, Lake Washington School District had vocational training, and then in the 70s it was split into Lake Washington Institute of Lake Tech over in Kirkland, and then Lake Washington School District did the academics. Over the years, the use of the technical and vocational education program kind of faded away, and now it's coming back. Two of my 4 children actually transferred to Lake Tech for their high school program and started doing the kinds of programs that you're asking about. They have a whole range of programs of study, from welding to nursing to mechanics. It was very difficult for us to figure out that these programs existed, and the school district needs to do a much better job of publicizing it on the website and through counselors. My son also participated in WANIC for 11th and 12th grades and eventually went to DigiPen and is now a programmer. So that's another program. It's more rigorous. One thing I found out was that my son's friends who did the mechanics at Lake Tech were having a lot of trouble with basic math. They had trouble with decimals to fractions, and that is actually something that I want to emphasize in the elementary grades. I want them to be able to do fractions, decimals, percents, additions, least common denominators. Just really drill the kids while they're in elementary school so that they don't end up at the high school or even college level taking remedial math. So.
I think each of you in the course of the evening have mentioned special education. From what I've seen, it needs help. We have silos, we have kids that are, their time in Gen Ed is either during lunch and or during recess or PE classes where they're playing off separately. There is a push among parents for inclusive education. What does inclusive education look like to you? How can we get these kids out of sequestered classrooms and into the general education classrooms?
John, it's you.
Still writing notes. So special education is, the interesting thing about special education is, to me, it's just a term. It's when it comes to, because I'm not a labeler. It drives, like I talked about it earlier in regards to highly capable. I don't like labeling anybody. When it comes to kids who, they call them special needs, it drives me nuts because I'm like, they're just kids that need extra help. You know, maybe there's a diagnosis that some doctor gave them a diagnosis. And I'm in the medical field, so there's a lot of diagnoses out there in regards to people. They put a few symptoms together and they say, hey, you're this, or you're this, or you're this. I like to look at any child as you are who you are. What do you need to have some extra help? An example is my son is in first grade. He needed extra help in reading and writing last year. So he took advantage of some of the systems within Ella Baker to get extra reading help and extra writing help. And he improved throughout the year, and he ended up going back to his regular class. So I think there are some processes that are already in place in regards to those very specific types of things. But when it comes to kids that are very, there's different levels of autism, obviously. There's different levels of ADHD. When it comes to kids that get those specific diagnoses, because that's probably part of what we're talking about, sensory issues, those types of things. I think paraeducators and counselors are the two people that can help them get back into the classroom the quickest. And I think we need counselors that actually counsel kids versus just testing kids for those specific conditions. We need counselors who work with kids on a daily basis. They have questions, if they have needs, if they have issues, they can go to them and talk to them versus those counselors just testing. And we have paraeducators that are working with them as well to help them outside the classroom. And the whole idea is to get them inside the classroom.
Susan?
It sounds like you think that students with special education needs are being completely removed from the classroom, and I think that's not the case. That was the case about 20 years ago, and from talking to parents, it was just awful. Currently, special education students are integrated into the classroom. What we need more of is to take them for tutoring and behavior therapy, especially during the time when they need to be, let's say for reading. They shouldn't be in the regular reading program. If they can have a tutor who can help with their dyslexia, that's what we're looking for. We want to target the learning to the disability. That's what we really don't get enough of. The idea that children are ostracized, well, that's a different issue. That's children refusing to play with other children. And their behavior therapy helps them to learn how to control their hand motions, control their head rocking, these things help them become integrated and accepted by their peer group, and we need a lot more of that.
So thank you, Mickey, for that question. Inclusion in the special education area has been a very hot topic, I guess I would say at this point in time. It's being advocated for very strongly nationwide as well as here, and as well it should. Inclusion is speaking to that a student with special needs should be served in the regular education classroom to the highest percentage possible. That pulling them out into a excluded classroom actually is not doing a service for that student. And so how do you go about including those students? Washington State, if you look at the data, does not show to be very well in the area of inclusion. And Lake Washington as well, when we did the special education review, there were definite issues that we were not performing the way we should in the area of inclusion of our students in regular education. So with that, there has been efforts that Lake Washington has been involved with, and I'm sure you're aware of, Mickey, I have no doubt. With that, we have been working for the last year, it's preschool is more specifically where we've been doing a lot of the work. So I've been working with the University of Washington to design the inclusion model to be able to do it. They call it a 50-50. So we'll have 50 regular developing, typical development. I'm trying to remember the actual terminology, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mickey, as to what it should be. Typically developing, thank you, as well as special education. And with that comes additional costs, because with that you do have to have a lower class ratio, class size. You do need to have extra staff in order to support it. Those are investments we're making, and those are the pieces that we have going forward. So we're going to be piloting this at this point in time. We visited a school district down in Westland, Oregon, to look at the inclusion model that they're using and which to do it. Our superintendent, Dr. Stavum, actually comes from a district that has a much higher inclusion practice than we have. So we're able to use her experience as well in order to drive that. So support it completely, have been in the process. I do think we have to think about how to do it effectively for all students, because if we don't do it well, we can actually do harm on both sides. So we just need to make sure we're really thoughtful in how we go forward. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And when it comes to international school, just like Bellevue, you guys have lottery. What I realized was in Bellevue that the lottery was not working because a few schools were just applying the lottery, and that was the only people able to get in. So I kind of suggested to have lottery, but each elementary school should be given a location and have lottery within them. So that way you bring more diversity. What you suggested and how you can change it to have more equity in terms of getting to international school?
Could I just clarify the question to make sure I'm not sure if I'm understanding correctly, is it that we use a lottery system for the choice schools? And as we're looking at that, your concern is that that might not be equitable. Is that correct? So in Bellevue, that has the international school, similar to that we have the International Community School in Bellevue, and we have the international school here in Lake Washington. And that's one of our choice schools. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you, Suri. Susan?
I'm not sure I understood the question. Oh, okay.
So the question is for
Yes.
choice schools,
I
is
have-
the lottery system
Yes.
fair,
Yes.
for lack of a better
think
word?
The lottery system is based on the students who submit their name and their application to the specific school by the specific date, and too many students don't really even understand the process. If to be more equitable, every student should end up in the lottery system and get a number, and then once they have their number, they can decide what they want to apply to and how they want to use that. The real question is, why do we have such a shortage of choice schools? Why can't we offer enough to fill the need? And the answer is there's no good reason. We should find out how many students are interested and then adjust the programs to fit the demand. That's probably the best way to move forward. Currently, what we have is it doesn't really work. I agree, and I don't know enough about Bellevue's to comment on their program.
Okay, Siri.
Choice schools in the lottery system. At this point, so with the lottery system, any student has the opportunity. It actually is all online at this point in time. One of the steps we did when we looked at our choice schools, you could see that again, demographically, it was not representative within our community. That you could see there were certain student populations that weren't attending those choice schools. The question would be, maybe they didn't think that was a school that fit what they wanted. It might have been their choice. My son had the option to go to STEM when it first opened, Tesla, and he chose not to because the comprehensive high school gave him more opportunities for jazz music and drama and other things. So there was more option for him actually at that school. So with that lottery system, the challenge is, you're right, we have an oversubscribing within our system. More students want to go to it than we have spaces for. But those are designed as smaller curriculum or smaller schools, not smaller class size, they have the same class size, but smaller schools, as well as a very specific curriculum. So there is a different work that goes on in those environments. The lottery system has its faults. At the same time, our students have the capacity to apply online. We actually removed barriers to that lottery system so they don't have to attend the school. So we tried to decrease the barriers in order for you to be able to apply, to see if that could start to address some of the disparities. Transportation is another component that comes up with these systems. As well, there's the question of how do you ensure that our comprehensive high schools, those ones, are as equally attractive, because there is as much rigor, if not more, at those schools as well as at our choice schools. And our choice schools are really meant to be chosen for a curricular choice. It's thematically where you want to go. We have a fascinating example at Mead Elementary School right now. It actually is not a lottery. You go to it, if you attend Mead, you can choose to be in it or not. And they actually expanded that program specifically because they had so many parents involved with it. But there are parents who don't want it as well. And so you have to, when you have a scarce resource, as a choice school concept is, a lottery is one way to do it. You can change the system. There'll just be other challenges in which to do so.
So I love the idea of choice schools. I think it's great to have other opportunities for kids that may not, do well in a specific environment in a larger school. I think in a perfect world, we would have choice schools, more choice schools all around like Washington School District, and have really small class sizes, 15, 16 kids to one teacher. And that'd be awesome. But I think the big problem is space. And we would have to figure out where these choice schools would go. And then obviously we'd have to build these choice schools as well. So I think in a perfect world, it'd be great to have a lot of extra choice schools. And as far as when it comes to the lottery system, it's, I do feel it sounds like it's easier, based on what Siri was saying, it's easy for parents to, put into the lottery as far as if their kids want to go into the choice school. But maybe there's some parents that don't want to go in, so they don't go into that lottery. But at the end of the day, it's really comes down to, making it easily accessible for people, for parents to just get into the process of potentially getting their kids into those schools. And I know it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I think, you think of, again, I go back to the parents' thought in their head. It's like, hey, my kid would do really well in a choice school, but I have to get into this lottery system, and then they don't get chosen, and they get put right back into a school where they're not being successful. So I think that's one area we can have a lot of discussion on the school board, as far as like, what can we do for those kids and those parents whose kids aren't doing well in the specific environment that they are in a so-called regular school versus a choice school.
This will be our last audience question.
What's your feeling about year-round school and meeting the capacity of our growth issue?
Two questions, or do you want them to work together? Okay. So, John, you ended, so it's actually Siri this time.
So when the Long-Term Facilities Task Force got together, there was a lot of discussion around alternative scheduling for schools in which to do so. There are year-round schools in the sense that you go year-round. You have you go for 3 months, you take 3 weeks off, you come back for 3 months, and that's actually one system of year-round school. That does not increase any capacity within your schools to do more. There was the multi-track system that was set up where is another option where you break your year into 4 and your child only attends 3 of those. And so then you rotate through this system. So I might have a child who goes to 1, 2, and 3 and another child who goes to 2, 3, 4. So you increase the capacity of your schools. I'm a strong believer in a year-round school that's not multi-tracked. I think having an option of a choice school that you as a family could choose to be able to do a year-round school, so there's no summer slide. There's issues then that you can have a different offset of 3 weeks with vacation. I think that option of scheduling is a great idea and it has great possibilities. Multi-track schools in general, you'll see that they're done because of growth issues. I have never seen it done because it's an educationally smart thing to do. It's done because they have overcrowding, they have facility issues, and they haven't been able to address those, and so they place a pain point in a very different fashion. I think of this from a family side and multi-tracking and how difficult it would have been to have my son in school while my daughter was on vacation for 3 months. I don't know how I would handle that in that setting in which to be able to handle that as a family. I don't know how a band program would work in that setting. You'd constantly be losing your different instruments at different times or orchestra. So it was one of those things of I don't see multi-track as a good option for facilities. I see a year-round school as great options for the family to be able to choose another way in which for their children to be educated that fits better with their lifestyle.
John?
So I'm a big fan of trimester schedules. So when I was in chiropractic college, we did trimester schedule. We'd go to school, like Siri was saying, for 3 months, then we'd have a couple of weeks off, go 3 months again. We had like a 3 or 4 week summer break, and then during winter time, we had like a 2 week break. And I think that's really important because even my wife, when I talk to my wife, who's, like I mentioned earlier, she's a middle school science teacher, there's so much stuff that the kids forget. And just getting back into the routine after being off for 2 months, even though our summers are getting shorter and shorter because of various things. I believe the trimester schedule would work really well. And I know a big issue for some people would be, well, we want to take vacations and we want to do these types of things. But I think at the end of the day, being in the classroom for 3 months 3 months at a time, and a couple week break, and then 3 months at a time, I think the kids are going to retain a lot more doing it that way versus having that long 2 month break in the middle of the summer where they have to have summer school and other kinds of things implemented to, like reading classes or writing classes and those types of things. The other thing that this is maybe far-fetched, but I would hope that we can talk at in the future, is getting a lot of the school districts around this area together when it comes to that type of stuff. So let's say like Washington School District does trimester schedule, but North Shore decides to stay with the regular schedule that we're currently on now. That really, because there's a lot of people realistically that work at various districts, or their kids go maybe to one school, and there's a lot of different schedules that have to be dealt with when it comes to that. So it'd be great if, like Washington, let's say, does trimester. It'd be great if like North Shore, Issaquah, Bellevue, Mercer Island all kind of follow the same path when it comes to whatever it is that's decided.
Susan, the year-round school was discussed probably a decade ago, and the sentiment was no way. But parents' work habits have changed, and we're seeing so many dual parents working that year-round school might just be a better option at going forward. We would need to poll the community and ask, what do you think? Because I really do believe that people's attitudes about year-round school probably have changed. Fortunately, my children are out of school, so I don't have to address that. But maybe the time has come to examine whether or not we should keep children in school year-round with punctuated by vacations. Thank you.
sure it's going to change. It's not going to change. All right. Thank you all again for coming this evening. I do want to give you some time if you'd like to chat with the candidates individually. Thank you for Tom Bird for working on my AV this evening, and